The city of Seattle hummed with life on a crisp winter evening. People bustled through the streets, wrapped in thick scarves and coats, their breath misting in the air. Keanu Reeves, known to the world as a movie star but seeking a quiet moment to himself, had just finished an evening stroll near Pike Place Market. Dressed in a gray wool coat and a beanie, he was almost unrecognizable in the crowd. As he approached a narrow alley lined with small shops, he spotted a young girl sitting on the cold pavement near a bakery. Her clothes were tattered, and she clutched a frayed notebook against her chest. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, yet her sunken eyes and pale cheeks made her look far older. Keanu slowed his steps, his gaze drawn to the girl's trembling hands as she scribbled furiously in her notebook. Curious and concerned, he approached her, crouching down to her level. "Hey there," he said gently, his deep voice carrying a warmth that immediately caught the girl's attention. She looked up, startled, her brown eyes wide with fear. The pencil in her hand froze mid-stroke, and she pulled the notebook closer to her chest. "It's okay," Keanu added quickly, his hands raised slightly to show he meant no harm. "I'm not here to bother you. I just noticed your drawings. They're beautiful." The girl hesitated before relaxing slightly. She glanced down at her notebook and mumbled, "Thank you." Keanu smiled. "What's your name?" "Ellie," she said softly, still eyeing him with caution. "Ellie," he repeated warmly. "I'm Keanu. Nice to meet you. Do you mind if I sit here for a moment?" Ellie nodded shyly, and Keanu lowered himself onto the pavement beside her, his back against the brick wall. For a few moments, they sat in silence. Keanu noticed that Ellie's notebook was filled with intricate sketches of animals, landscapes, and faces. Her talent was undeniable. "You're really good," he said, breaking the quiet. "Do you like to draw?" Ellie nodded again. "I love it. It's the only thing that makes me feel normal." Keanu tilted his head, intrigued by her words. "Why only drawing?" Ellie hesitated before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because everything else is hard. My mom's sick, and we don't have money for doctors or much of anything. I draw to make it less scary." Keanu felt a pang in his chest. He looked at Ellie's thin frame, her shivering hands, and the determination etched into her young face. "Where's your mom now?" "At the shelter," Ellie said. "She told me to stay outside because she didn't want me to see her cry. I think it hurts her to pretend everything's okay." Keanu leaned forward, his voice steady but compassionate. "Ellie, do you have anyone else? Family? Friends who can help?" She shook her head, her grip tightening on the notebook. "No. It's just us." Keanu took a deep breath, considering his next words carefully. "You're really brave, you know that." Ellie looked at him, her lips trembling as tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't feel brave," she whispered. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook he always carried. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "This is for you. I want you to keep drawing. And I want you to promise me something." Ellie blinked, wiping her eyes as she took the notebook. "What?" "Promise me you'll never stop believing things can get better," Keanu said firmly. "And if you ever need help, you call this number." He wrote down his assistant's contact information on the first page. Ellie stared at the notebook, her fingers brushing over the smooth leather cover. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Keanu smiled softly. "Because I've been where you are, scared, unsure, and feeling like the world's too big to face alone. But someone helped me once, and now it's my turn to help you." Ellie's eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "Do you trust me?" Keanu asked gently. Ellie nodded slowly, her grip on the notebook tightening. "Good," Keanu said, standing and offering her a hand. "Now, let's go check on your mom." Keanu walked with Ellie through the dimly lit streets of Seattle. The chill in the air deepened as night began to fall, and he noticed how Ellie's small frame seemed to shrink further into her threadbare jacket. The shelter came into view, a squat, weathered building with flickering neon letters spelling, Hope Haven. The glow was faint and unreliable, much like the resources it offered. Ellie hesitated outside the door, clutching the notebook he had given her like a lifeline. Keanu knelt beside her. "It's okay. I'm right here," he said, his voice calm and steady. She nodded and led him inside. The shelter's interior was a stark contrast to the bustling streets outside. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and desperation. Rows of cots lined the walls, each occupied by someone seeking solace from life's hardships. Volunteers moved quietly among them, distributing blankets and bowls of soup. Ellie scanned the room, her eyes landing on a woman sitting on one of the cots. The woman's face was pale, and her frail hands trembled as she held a steaming cup of tea. "Mom!" Ellie called, rushing over. The woman looked up, her face lighting with a mixture of relief and worry. "Ellie! I told you to stay close," she said weakly, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. Keanu approached cautiously, giving them a moment. When the woman looked up at him, her expression shifted to guarded curiosity. "Who's this?" she asked, her voice rasping with exhaustion. "This is Keanu," Ellie said, her voice a little stronger now. "He helped me when I was outside. He's really nice." Keanu gave a small smile and extended a hand. "It's nice to meet you, ma'am. Ellie told me a little about your situation. I hope you don't mind me checking in." The woman hesitated before shaking his hand. "I'm Sarah," she said, her tone cautious. "And, thank you. But we're fine." Keanu noted the strain in her voice, the way her eyes flickered to Ellie as if trying to shield her from the truth. "I'm glad you have each other," he said gently. "But if there's anything I can do to help, please let me know." Sarah's resolve faltered. "We don't need charity," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Keanu knelt to meet her gaze, his expression sincere. "Sometimes, we all need a little help. There's no shame in accepting it, especially when it's for someone as incredible as Ellie." Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She opened her mouth to respond but was interrupted by a coughing fit that left her clutching her chest. "Mom!" Ellie cried, her voice trembling with fear. Keanu sprang into action, gently supporting Sarah as the coughing subsided. He noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the way her breaths came shallow and labored. "You need a doctor," he said firmly. Sarah shook her head weakly. "I can't afford it," she whispered. Keanu's jaw tightened. He looked around and spotted a volunteer nearby. Rising, he approached the young man, who was stacking blankets onto a cart. "Excuse me," Keanu said, keeping his voice low. "Is there a clinic nearby? Somewhere she can get urgent care?" The volunteer glanced at Sarah and nodded. "There's a free clinic 3 blocks down. They'll see her, but the wait time can be long." Keanu thanked him and returned to Sarah and Ellie. "There's a clinic nearby," he said. "I'll take you there." No arguments. Sarah hesitated but saw the determination in his eyes. Finally, she nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. Keanu helped her to her feet, steadying her as they made their way to the shelter's exit. Ellie stayed close, her small hand clutching her mother's tightly. The walk to the clinic was slow, but Keanu made sure to support Sarah every step of the way. When they arrived, the waiting room was packed with people, many of them coughing or cradling injuries. The receptionist barely looked up as they approached. "Name?" she asked flatly, typing on her computer. "Sarah Whitman," Keanu said, stepping forward. "She's having trouble breathing. Can someone see her now?" The receptionist sighed. "We're at capacity. It'll be at least 2 hours before a doctor can." Keanu reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. I can make a donation. Enough to hire more staff, cover expenses, whatever you need. Just get her seen now. The receptionist's eyes widened, finally taking a closer look at him. Recognition flickered across her face. Wait, are you? Keanu gave her a small, disarming smile. I'm just someone who wants to help. Please. The receptionist nodded quickly and made a call. Within minutes, a nurse appeared and led Sarah to an examination room. Keanu and Ellie sat in the waiting room, the silence between them comfortable yet heavy with unspoken questions. Is my mom going to be okay? Ellie asked after a while, her voice small. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. She's in good hands now, he said. We'll do everything we can to make sure she gets better. Ellie nodded, her gaze fixed on the floor. Why are you doing this? Keanu thought for a moment before answering. Because sometimes, we cross paths with people who need us. And when that happens, it's our responsibility to help if we can. Ellie looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and gratitude. Before Keanu could say more, the nurse returned. The doctor's running some tests, but it looks like Sarah has a respiratory infection. It's serious but treatable, she said. Keanu let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Thank you, he said sincerely. She'll need antibiotics and some rest, the nurse added. We'll write a prescription, but, she hesitated. What is it? Keanu asked. The medication isn't cheap, the nurse admitted. We can offer a discount, but it'll still be around $150. Keanu nodded without hesitation. I'll cover it. The nurse smiled. That's very kind of you. I'll bring the paperwork. As they waited for Sarah to finish her treatment, Keanu turned to Ellie. I have an idea, he said, pulling out his phone. Do you want to help me with something important? Ellie's eyes lit up with curiosity. What is it? You'll see, Keanu said with a grin. When Sarah finally emerged from the treatment room, she looked tired but relieved. The doctor had given her a prescription and clear instructions for recovery. Keanu paid for the medication at the clinic's small pharmacy and handed the bag to Sarah. Thank you, she said, her voice still hoarse but filled with gratitude. I don't know how we'll ever repay you. You don't have to, Keanu replied with a warm smile. But I do have an idea about how to help you and Ellie in the long run. Sarah gave him a questioning look, and Keanu gestured for her and Ellie to follow him outside. The winter air was crisp and cold, but there was a renewed energy in Ellie's steps as she clutched her notebook tightly. Keanu hailed a cab, directing it to a small community center he had passed earlier. What's here? Ellie asked as they pulled up to the modest brick building. You'll see, Keanu said, his eyes twinkling. Inside the center, the walls were lined with colorful artwork created by local kids. A middle-aged woman with a warm smile greeted them at the front desk. Mr. Reeves, she said, her tone both surprised and delighted. What brings you here? Keanu leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. I met a very talented artist today, he said, nodding toward Ellie. I was wondering if you had any art programs she could join. The woman's smile widened. Absolutely. We have free art classes every weekend, and we're always happy to welcome new talent. Ellie's eyes lit up. Really? She asked, her voice tinged with both excitement and disbelief. Really, the woman replied. And we'll provide all the supplies you need. Keanu turned to Sarah. This is just the start, he said. Ellie has a gift, and I want to make sure she has the chance to use it. I'd also like to set up something more permanent for both of you. Sarah looked at him, stunned. Keanu, we can't accept all of this. You've already done so much. Keanu shook his head gently. Sarah, this isn't just for you. It's for Ellie, and for the other kids who might be in the same situation. Let me help. Before she could protest further, he added, do you trust me? Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Good, Keanu said. I'll handle the details, but for now, let's get Ellie signed up for those classes. Over the next few weeks, Keanu worked tirelessly behind the scenes. He contacted his team and set up a fund to support Sarah and Ellie, covering medical expenses and providing them with a safe place to live. He also partnered with the community center to expand their programs, offering art scholarships for kids like Ellie. Ellie thrived in her new environment. Every weekend, she attended art classes, where her talent blossomed under the guidance of professional artists. Her confidence grew with each stroke of the pencil, and she began to dream bigger than ever before. One afternoon, as Keanu visited the community center, Ellie ran up to him, holding a framed sketch. I made this for you, she said, beaming. Keanu took the frame, his heart swelling as he looked at the drawing. It was a portrait of him, but not as the movie star. It was him sitting on the pavement beside Ellie, handing her a notebook. Ellie, this is amazing, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Ellie grinned. You believed in me when no one else did. I wanted to say thank you. Keanu crouched to her level, resting a hand on her shoulder. You don't need to thank me, he said. This is all you. You're the one who's brave, talented, and strong. I just gave you a little push. Sarah approached, her face glowing with health and gratitude. Keanu, she said softly, you've changed our lives. I don't know how we'll ever repay you. You already have, Keanu replied. Seeing you both happy and safe is all I need. As the sun set over the city, Keanu stood with Ellie and Sarah, watching the children at the community center laugh and play. In that moment, he knew he had made the right choice. This wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about using what he had to make a real difference, one small act of kindness at a time. And for Ellie, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, opportunity, and the promise of a brighter future.